In this final movie, I'll review the settings that I recommend you change inside the Preferences dialog box. Assuming that you have Photoshop open, go to the Edit menu if you're working on a PC. That would be the Photoshop menu if you're working on the Mac. Then choose the Preferences command, which is much higher in the menu on the Macintosh side. And then choose General. Or even more simply, you can press the keyboard shortcut Control-K here on a PC or Command-K on the Mac. You definitely want to turn off Export Clipboard. And the reason that this option should not be on is because you routinely end up copying extremely large images inside of Photoshop. Now, that doesn't present Photoshop with a problem. You can copy and paste inside Photoshop all you want. But then when you switch to a different application, Photoshop by default tries to export that gargantuan clipboard information to the operating system, and at best, that creates a huge slowdown, and at worst, the operating system ends up choking on it. So unless you're just copying wee little graphics that you're then turning around and pasting into Microsoft Word or some weird workflow like that, turn this checkbox off. I also turn off Use Shift key for tool switch. That way you can switch between the marquee tools, for example, by pressing the M key instead of having to press Shift M. Zoom resizes windows. That's turned off by default on the PC and on by default on the Mac. I recommend you Macintosh people turn it off. And the reason is this way you get consistent behavior between the zoom tool and the zoom commands. So then if you want to zoom without resizing the window, you press Control plus or Control minus on the PC. That's Command plus or Command minus on the Mac. And if you want to zoom and resize the window with this checkbox off, you just press Control Alt plus or Control Alt minus on the PC. That's Command Option plus or Command Option minus on the Mac. All right, next we'll switch over to interface. And by default, when you're reviewing an image in the standard or full screen modes, you'll see this light gray background behind the image, which I don't think offsets the image nearly well enough. So I recommend you darken that up by clicking on this pop-up menu here, select custom color. For some reason, it comes up blue, which is weird. Anyway, change the H and S values to 0. And then I recommend a brightness value of 35%. Click OK. Do the exact same thing for full screen with menus. So click on the pop-up menu, choose Select Custom Color, and dial in 00 for hue and saturation, and then 35 for brightness. Click OK. And I also recommend that you change the second drop shadow setting to none, because we don't need drop shadows in full screen. Again, that's my opinion. You can go your own way. On a PC, we're pretty used to opening documents as tabs, and that's the way a lot of PC people prefer to work, and that's the way I will be working. Most Macintosh people prefer this option to be turned off, and if so, if you have open documents as tabs turned off, I also recommend you turn off this second one. Enable floating document window docking. That way your image windows don't tend to glom together when you're dragging them around. In my case, I'm going to leave the checkbox on, though. So I'm saying that you either turn both of them on or both of them off. On the Windows side, both on. On the Mac side, both off. Just a recommendation. I'm going to switch to file handling now. This I really want you to do. Change Maximize PSD and PSB file compatibility from Ask to Never. Now, this is specifically a recommendation for keeping your file sizes down. Otherwise, you're going to have gargantuan huge images. The only reason not to do this is if you work with Lightroom a lot and you want to be able to see the previews inside Lightroom. This way, you won't see previews inside Lightroom. You will inside the bridge, but not inside Lightroom. But I think it's worth it because you get smaller files. All right, now I'm going to switch to performance. And I just want you to make sure that Enable OpenGL Drawing is turned on and that a video card is detected. If not, and you're sure that you have a video card that supports OpenGL, which is important for getting any kind of reasonable work done inside of Photoshop, then you should quit out of the program and either restart the program or restart your computer and try again and see if you can get Photoshop to recognize what's going on. Otherwise, you may have to call your video card vendor. All right, now I'm going to switch over to cursors, and I'm going to turn on Show Crosshair in Brush Tip. Just a personal preference. I want you to know that I'm doing it. If you like big, huge font previews when you're trying to switch between typefaces and figure out which face to use, then click on the word type there and change the font preview size from medium to one of these others, either large or extra large or huge. I'm going to go with extra large in my case because I have a fairly small screen to work with. And then finally click on 3D. And make sure up here that OpenGL is turned on so you'll get the best performance. You should have Allow Direct to Screen turned on as well. Auto Hide Layers was that option that we just turned off at the end of the previous video. It should still be off for you. I will anticipate that one of your initial frustrations as you're working with 3D inside of Photoshop is that as you're creating your 3D objects, they don't seem to cast shadows onto each other, and that's because you have to ray trace the objects in order to see the shadows. If you want to get a rough sense of those shadows while you were working, you would switch to Ray Tracer and make sure shadows is turned on. However, that is going to really degrade Photoshop's performance. I just want you to know that. You get a sense of your shadows as you work, but you have to be very, very patient as you work as well, which is why I'm going to suggest we leave this set to OpenGL, first checkbox on, second checkbox off, and that is it. Pretty tedious, I know, but we are now on the same page. Click the OK button. Now, there's just one more thing we need to do. In order to save those changes we made inside the Preferences dialog box, as well as those interface changes that we applied in the previous movie, we need to quit the program. Because if we crashed right now, then we'd end up losing all that work. So what I'd like you to do, if you're working on a PC, go up to the File menu and choose the Exit command, where you can press that keyboard shortcut Control-Q for quit. On the Mac, you go to the Photoshop menu and choose Quit Photoshop, where you press Command-Q. And that'll go ahead and quit the program. It'll also save all of your preferences. If you have any unsaved changes to your images, you'll have to decide whether to save those changes or not. All right, now that you and I are on the same page, I recommend you advance to the next chapter so we can get some real 3D work done.